Recording.
All right. And we are live. You're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
I'm Nathan.
And we have another very special episode. We have the 1984 Threads.
Yeah. Continuing our theme of nuclear apocalypse.
Suggested by Nathan, which I don't know. What's your history with Threads?
Masterpiece Theater.
Huh.
It's because remember I think I've talked about this before, how it's like we had cable growing up, but we had like basic cable for a lot of times, and but you always had like 4 PBS feeds.
Yeah.
And I just that's why I like discovered Doctor Who, and like Masterpiece Theater would report any BBC show to America through PBS. So it was I watched this one night and I was like, well, this is horrifying. Let's see what this, because I wasn't allowed to watch the day after. Probably because mom and dad were rightly concerned that like Nathan's really obsessed with a lot of stuff like this, and this wouldn't be good for him. And so yeah, they didn't let me watch that. But I watched like the even more horrible BBC co-produced with an Australian company, Threads, which was this was like BBC's The Day After.
Yeah. Well, there's also like I saw in the trivia. There's like a ton of very specific, like, you know, what would happen to Britain in a nuclear war books that came out. Like one was called like the War Game or something like that.
Yeah,
and other stuff like that.
Oh, the '60s it was a docudrama called The War Game.
Oh, okay.
Which this is what I call this was from the era of like nuclear war paranoia in the 80s.
Yeah.
Because this is like we said, we had The Day After. The Miracle Mile came almost a different era, even though it was only 6 years later. It was a different kind of movie. War Games, different kind of movie. This is like basically just anti-nuclear propaganda made into a film where people are put in the most bleak position imaginable. All the stuff that, you know, the worst stuff you could imagine happening. And this was also based on like the Able Archer 83. I remember that book I read, The War Scare. It was a lot more well known in Europe how shook up the Soviets were by Able Archer 83 than it ever was here, because it was a NATO exercise. Like, we don't have NATO exercises in America. But yeah, that was this was more like this is more in the vein of deliberate war, though. What makes this and The Day After different is like, oh, it's a deliberate war that wasn't accidentally started by some misunderstanding or whatever. No, it's like you can see the march to war in this movie. So this was more like, just to scare the hell out of everyone about what, you know, a nuclear war would look like, specifically very UK centric.
Well, I feel like because it's kind of reverted back to like, you know, wouldn't the apocalypse be fun because it's just like serves the like libertarian paranoid dreamland of like no government, like you rule yourself.
Yeah, I mean, people had stupid ideas back then, but now they have new stupid ideas. Back then it was a little bleaker and more unimaginable than now. It's like, oh no, it's very survivable. It's like, no, neither of those scenarios are true, or profit from them. But some people seem to think like, oh yeah, I want an apocalypse. I want to get rid of all, you know, XYZ, whoever they don't like politically or etc. But they still think somehow there's going to be toilet paper and delivery pizza in that apocalypse. So it's like, wait a minute, you're not thinking this through. It's like when people talk about an American Civil War. It's like, yeah, we're going to start a civil war. And it's like, do you like hot and cold running water? Do you like electricity? Because those things are there's not going to be like, okay, have your civil war, but all the municipal support and every other structure that maintains you, we're going to still keep going to work, but you guys get out there and shoot each other. Like, no, this is not. Yeah, it's the age, the stupidity changes.
Yeah.
It's the same stupidity, just with different rules in play. Different fantasy scenarios in play, I should say.
Director was Mick Jackson, which we have a weird connection between last week's movie because I talked
Yes.
about Miracle Mile, the cinematographer, uh, how he worked on Volcano and how that was like a big disaster, but it's like, well, he wasn't blamed for that because he got to make Blade the next year. Well, this guy directed Volcano.
Yep. Yeah, this
Cinematography.
guy directed The Bodyguard, Volcano, L.A. Story, and what
Oh,
was
okay.
it?
Yeah.
And he did an a really cool one. It was about the Holocaust denial trial that happened in the UK.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about that in another episode.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same guy. He just
Huh. Okay.
does a lot. Those are his films. Now television, it's like he's done a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and like in British television is like an assembly line, so it's like, okay, well, this is your trade, so here's some work to
Oh,
get done.
I just meant like the American
Oh, he did a
television.
lot of American television. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of those like HBO things from before it was HBO, Game of Thrones HBO, where they
Yeah.
just did like they mainly replayed movies and then had some in-house content. It was always kind of like, you know, like he did the McMartin trial one, which was actually pretty cool. The one with James Woods in it about the satanic panic in California in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
The people from that preschool, they basically like they have like dungeons and they're torturing children, sacrificing to Satan under their daycare center. And of course, guess what? It wasn't true. But and he did the one about the I don't know. There's a Live from Baghdad was another one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Nothing more recent, but yeah, this guy's like done a lot of things. Like a because I have this on. I got just the Blu-ray of this for some reason. I got it years ago too, and it has a lot of his commentary and stuff on it. They say it's remastered, and it's like how it looks like a 1980s low-budget British TV show. Okay, cool. It's
We have
remastered.
multiple cinematographers here: Andrew Dunn and Paul Morris. I guess because there's so much stock footage and still
Yeah, a
photography.
lot
That's
of
fun.
second unit and a lot of
Yeah.
like weird background type studio shooting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I probably watched this movie in like the worst mood possible, so I didn't, I didn't go.
Oh,
So I was like, because I was like, oh man, like, because I like, I had a million things to do and none of them were getting done, and then I was like, oh, maybe this movie can like, be interesting. And I was like, oh my god, did you just make me sit through an hour and 40-minute fucking PowerPoint presentation and then you had your apocalypse?
yeah, pretty much. All ambulances and emergency vehicles were moved to the country. Ticket had that kind of. Well, see, this was based on a it's a study they did in 1980 called Square Leg,
Yeah.
and it basically yeah. Here's where some of the stuff in the movie is really weird because Square Leg was like basically the home what they call the home office, which is like what would that be here? Department of the Interior, Department I don't know something whatever British version of like what would happen to the country like economically and with our infrastructure if we were attacked and how would we be attacked. And so of course like they just farmed it out to these people who is like yeah every Russian warhead is 1 megaton and most of them would be ground bursts and they would fire like 120 different weapons at different sites which would actually just unpeople the UK. Like if you fired that many weapons at that yield and you got like a 250 megaton worth of blasts in the UK, there wouldn't be a soul left alive. It would literally cover everything, and they wouldn't. And saying their ground bursts would just be like, oh, that's the worst possible. But even at that time, now this was kind of based on 70s concepts of nuclear war and Russian capabilities, and it was also just worst case scenario because it had to be because they were telling a story.
Yeah.
But it had this thin veneer of like, no, this is based on government studies, and it's like yeah, it was based on a government study that wasn't conducted by their defense department, and it had used really old information. It's like because the reason the Russians had such giant multi-megaton bombs is they couldn't target them accurately.
Yeah.
But a lot of those were aimed at the U.S. because it was much further. So they figured, well, if we get within a mile of the base, it's like, yeah, we'll just make a bigger bomb. But to hit England from Russia, even in the 80s, you wouldn't use like giant ICBMs and stuff. They could and they'd use much smaller weapons because the wind blows east to west. So why would you make this big nuclear fallout cloud over the UK that's just going to blow right back into Russia? But they had to tell a story. So.
Written by Barry Hines. I didn't look up any of these people. Cast Karen Meager. I mean, this whole cast is just kind of people have found like, yeah, you look right, because they just wanted authentic people.
Yeah,
which I think is
He's also an anti-nuclear activist as well as an actress. So,
Reese Dinsdale, David Brierly, again, people I'd never heard of before. Which is
just
fine.
The whole cast of Lord of the Rings. It's just all those kind of names.
Well, I think it was another reason why I just had like a misgiving with the movie is that like, it's like, yeah, the people are like, they're realistic, but they're also unlikable. So it's like, I don't care what happens. Kill them now. And it's like, no, they're not doing it. We have to set up all the stuff that happens. Again, I watched it in a bad mood, so it's not fair to the movie, but also it's like, War Games is a movie where also nothing happens, but like they make it, tense. For here, it's just a lot of like literal like PowerPoint presentation of like, and then this happened, and then this happened. Or my favorite one was like they have this thing of like basically the war starting where it's like they sent B-52s to bomb Iran, like a bunch of them, and then they launched an anti-air nuclear weapon. It's like, that sounds amazing. Let me see that. It's like, nah, we don't have the budget for that. Man.
Yeah. We're just going to show that.
Because that's kind of bold. Oh, yeah, we're going to defend our airspace by launching a nuke above it.
Well, it's one of those like thin set scenarios they came up with. It's because supposedly like what happened was America overthrew the Ayatollah.
Yeah.
And so there was a coup that we backed in Iran, and then the Russians swept in Iran, and then the Russians were sweeping in to defend Iran.
Yeah.
From a US coup, and then it leads to like nuclear weapons going on, like battlefield and airborne nuclear weapons going off, which is like, that's a heavy price. No one's really messing around with that over that. But you got to tell a story. So, yeah.
All right, so we have Act 1.
Yes,
it was really hard to pick out the act structure of this movie, but I made my best stab I could because I was just sitting there waiting all the time.
It's like every one of those is an act. So it's like, there's like 7 acts in the movie.
Well, I was just waiting. It's like, when the bomb goes off, that's going to be Act 2, right? No. Nope. We got an hour and 40 minutes before the bomb goes off. They have like stock photo of like a spider building a web. There's a voiceover about like society being vulnerable, and you got shots of Britain and stuff like that.
All the threads that tie us together can be broken. Yeah.
And you get the titles Threads by Barry Hines, which he's like the first name on the list, which I don't know, that's probably just some weird, British broadcasting standard thing. Like the person that wrote the screenplay gets some kind of like first stab at credit.
Yeah.
This says Sheffield, Saturday, March 5th. We have a car on a hillside. There's a fighter jets fly by. I wrote, are these supposed to be young people?
Yeah. Kind of confusing.
Wow, they're just British. And also, mid 80s, people just look different.
Drank a lot more and ate a lot more fried food.
There's also like, what do you call that? Not a depression, but what's the other thing? What's the slight thing? Economic downturn or whatever.
Yeah, there was this was like
A
set. This is
recession.
early in Thatcher's England. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, and the radio's playing Johnny Be Good, which I think comes back like 3 times in this movie.
Yeah, I think they brought the rights to like 2 songs.
Yeah.
Played on the stereo.
The kids are making out like over the cliff. Then we have Thursday, May 5th, Soviets moving into Iran. So Nathan, you were gonna have to so I was getting mad at this movie, so I just started scrub watching it. I was watching on Tubi, so it was like 30 seconds forward, anything new happened, so I might have missed like a lot of title cards. There might be even more title cards. But is this where this might be where they explain like what you just said, where it's like there was like the CIA backed a coup, and now this is the Russian responses to invade Iran.
Yeah, to invade Iran. Yeah, because that's that that would be in their interest to do that. If we had a coup in Iran, is to start a shooting war with the U.S., which really didn't have anything to do with like the rest of Europe, but they're going to get sucked into it because of NATO. So,
and then we have the couple, Ruth and Jimmy, and they're at a pub. She's apparently pregnant. The dude's worried. We have Sunday, May 8th. This is where they talk about the coup. They're like at a corner shop or something. There's like a kid that's like distracted with headphones. So it's like, the Walkman is now become the cell phone or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what's going on. Like the lady's like marking the papers. I don't know if she's like, if this is like some sort of like paper boy or something like that. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, he's like a paper boy, and she's marking the numbers down because she's like, don't forget the the one people's thing.
We cut to Jimmy feeding birds. Apparently, he's just an aviary, or however you'd say that.
Yeah.
Which I thought was like, oh, is this his job? Like, no, this is his hobby. Make people really like, feel close, because everybody just like, feeds birds in a cage.
Yeah.
In a weird walk-in cage.
Well, you gotta have something to do.
Yeah, I don't know. He's like a carpenter, but he's also his dad's was planting, was farming at some point, but that seemed to be like his side job and not his main job. So I just have absolutely no idea like what people in Britain do at all times of day. So I just don't.
He worked at something called a joinery, which
Okay.
I looked it up as like they just make like the wooden structures for homes and different things.
Okay.
They make all the joins and then they deliver them.
Okay.
So that's whatever. Yeah, he's basically a carpenter. And his dad, I think, was retired or almost retired. It's not really very. I just know there's tension between the father and the son.
Yeah.
Because it's like his weird conversation with his dad. It's like, have you considered an abortion, Jimmy? And it's like, it's with the recession on, not a good time to have a kid. Yeah. It's like dark. Yeah, murder my grandchild because of the recession.
And then the little brother's in the background, like, what's an abortion? The parents like, shut up.
Don't touch it, Mom. It's evil.
Yeah. And then he's playing like some weird, like Tiger handheld video game or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it took like 4 batteries a day to run those. And it was just like things moving in an LED. Yeah. And a fixed position LED, mind you, not.
I remember I used to play the Darkwing Duck version of that like all the time. Those things were awful, but like when you're a kid, it seems great.
Yeah, it's just a way to pass the time. If you don't have any animals to torture, that's what you got to do.
So we have titles. Sheffield, 4th largest city in Britain, population 545,000. What's the population now in Sheffield, Nathan? Can you look that up?
I don't know. Let me look that up.
Main industries: steel, engineering.
Not for a long, not even then, really.
And chemicals.
556,000.
Oh wow! They only grew by 10,000, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that place must be dead then. If it's been nearly 40 years, they've only gained 10,000 population.
Oh yeah, that was the steel area and all that.
Oh, okay.
It's basically Detroit. their version of Detroit. Well, they have a lot of versions of Detroit: Liverpool, Blackpool, uh, anything where all the mines used to be in like the north of England. That's really, really bad. It still is really bad.
Yeah.
They built nice bridges and like things up there. It's like 40% unemployment and 100% alcoholism. It's like, oh, this is great.
It says nearest military targets a NATO air base, then RAF Communication Center, spelled RE.
RAF Finnegalle.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things in here I was writing down where it's like the document. It's like, do you sure to mean to spell it this way? That's a British version. It's like, I guess I don't.
Yeah.
Which I always.
All these bases that were destroyed in this movie, or at least the two mentioned, both decommissioned.
Oh, okay.
Don't exist anymore.
The world that it. Wednesday, May 11th. They've got some lady watching Cars, and I wrote, "Oh, it's Ruth's parents," and here they're like debating the future, and then like, there's just like news of the Soviet and U.S. escalation in the background. Jimmy shows up with his parents, and everyone awkwardly meets each other. I don't even know what this is, because they were talking about getting married, so I don't know if this is like some weird like meeting or if this is like just kind of a homebrew like marriage thing going on,
yeah, it seems like just a bunch of like middle class people kind of on the edge of working class. Like, this is I'm his father, and you're the father of the daughter he knocked up, and we've already talked about abortion, and they say no. And it's like, yes, we want the grandchildren dead too. It's a recession, don't you know? It's such a very weird, stilted conversation. This movie is like some of the most stilted, weird. Upon reviewing it, it's like these people, the characterization is terrible.
Yeah, well, I mean, these people like weren't actors, so that means. And they have like basically, their 20-year-old, 35-year-old son with the parents, their 45-year-old going on 80 parents.
Yeah.
Thursday, May 12th, Ruth and Jimmy are looking at an apartment. You can see their breath in the apartment. It's like, it's quality.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's wanting to like take the wallpaper down and paint the walls black. It's like, I think we need to get a furnace in here first. We need to go to the council and see if we can get a permit to have 50 guys put a furnace in.
This might be a time where it was just easier to just like, you didn't pay your bill and just shut off the furnace, where now that's like, like premeditated homicide, so you can't do that.
Nope, that still goes on there.
Oh, no, there? Okay.
Yeah, I was listening to who is it? The British guy, like what's his name?
Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, it wasn't him. He was on there, but it was one of his friends from England, and they were talking about it's like it's coming up on Christmas, and it's like time to give money away so grandma doesn't freeze to death. Because they actually have like flyers they'll send you in the mail, like a picture of an old woman in a chair with her head in her hand like this, with a big blanket wrapped around her, and it's like, don't let mother freeze this winter or something like that. It's like they're still doing this, and it's 2020. Grandma's been freezing for 40 years. So yeah, it still goes on. Economically they're a lot like us. It's just ruthless. Well, especially now, because like it's 10 times more expensive to heat your house, because you're getting you got to get gas or natural gas from demons that are invading Europe. So.
Yeah, I remember that's probably the biggest problem in Europe right now. It's like, we got to cut off the Russian gas. It's like, hey, what's the one thing Russia did? It's just fill the world full of gas and natural gas and all that stuff.
Yeah. What were they good at? Like cars, tractors, aircraft? No. Natural gas.
So it's nighttime. The Walkman girl is doing homework, and then they talk about like a U.S. sub is sunk, and then like Reagan gives a speech that's like very antagonistic, so everyone's extra worried.
Mm-hmm. Never direct refer to any of the leaders or who they are. It's always the prime minister, the American president, the Soviet whatever, what they call him, premier.
Um, is it the prime minister in the or no? Wait, who's the premier?
The Soviet guy.
Soviet. Oh, so yeah, Soviet premier. I think I wrote Reagan gives a speech because they clearly have a sound alike doing a Reagan speech. So I think that's maybe why I wrote it. But yeah, I don't think they directly say who's representing either side.
No.
Although I'm pretty sure when Reagan saw this, he's like, "Hey, that's me."
Hey, Nancy, come here. Someone that sounds just like me. Isn't that great? It's like the world is ending. It's like, oh, go consult your horoscope. Leave me alone. I don't know what I'm doing. Wagon wheels, footballs. Who am I? Glad he's got the launch codes.
Well, if he's got them, so does Jesus.
Yeah. The hand of God will guide him towards the launch code. To digress into modern things just for a second here, though, I don't know when this is going to come out pretty quick, but that missile landed in Poland.
Yeah.
Killed those two guys. And I watch a lot of news feeds, especially before work in the morning. I'm drinking coffee. I'm just reading news. And I like some of the things. It's like, yeah, it's time to invoke the NATO articles. It's like, yeah, let's just go like full nuclear commitment because, a missile that it turns out was shot down by something else landed in a farm in Poland. I mean, I'm sorry 2 people died, but I like these people just all grim in the comments like it's time. It's like, what, to kill 70 million people? I don't think it's time for that. I'm not. Biden needs to stand by his NATO commitments. What? Get us all incinerated? Hey, look, I'm all for like people not being killed and having their country invaded, but some of these guys in these comment sections are a little hardcore. Like, time to launch. It's like, what? I think even Putin would be shocked. Like, what do you mean? What are they doing? They fired all their nuclear weapons. So remember, it's still out there, folks. The threat is real.
Yeah. And speaking of time commitments and the end of the world, Black Friday will be this Friday when you're listening to this. November 25th is Black Friday. If you go to our store at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory, you can get a t-shirt 20% off if you use the promo code BF2022. So
I'll have to remember that. I might actually buy one. Oh. So yeah, they're in the grubby apartment. They're in the apartment for impregnated single women.
Well, it's nighttime. I wrote the Walkman girl is doing homework. Yeah, the U.S. sub is sank. Reagan gives a speech, or the voiceover that sounds like Reagan gives a speech. Then we have the British voiceover tells like it's talking about like government breakdowns and a crisis, and then like they're talking about like how power diverts to like local people and who's best suited to do what jobs and stuff like that. So, British, they're good at bureaucracy. So here it is in full force.
Oh, they love those double-breasted suits. Come on, Nancy, I just took all the training. I'm gonna do my bit. It's like you're gonna die in a basement. Cool.
Jimmy's brother is building a model of an F4 Phantom.
Cool. Yeah, they have like stock footage of those all over.
Yeah.
I think all the RAF flew were F4 Phantoms by this movie.
I mean, it was a cool plane at the time. We now know it was a terrible plane, but well, it was a very fast plane that was heavy and could carry a lot of shit, but it wasn't good as a fighter aircraft.
No. It was a fighter bomber. Well, it's basically an F4 Phantom. It was like a hot rod.
Yeah.
It was great in a straight line. Couldn't beat it in a straight line. It'd throw in those afterburners and it was gone. I mean, you couldn't even, but it couldn't maneuver.
Yeah.
It's not like the F-16, not nearly as fast as an F4 Phantom, but it can like spin around like a spider monkey in the air. It's like, yeah, and it costs half as much.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing because they didn't put machine guns on F4 Phantoms because they thought everything was going to be missiles, and that ended up being kind of a boondoggle where it's like missiles aren't everything and they're horribly expensive. So.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple 20 millimeter shells, about $1,000 all in. An air-to-air missile, especially at that time with what processors cost and stuff. Yeah, it's like, $50,000-$60,000 in $70s. I mean, we're running out of stuff now.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the latest Ukraine authorization? It's like, oh, we're going to have to cut back on some of the stuff. It's like, why? Do we not believe in the fight anymore? It's like, no, we're just running out of stuff. And you want to know who else is running out of stuff? The Russians, even faster than us. Pretty soon they're going to be throwing rocks at each other. So, the missiles and all that stuff is like, that's what we don't have. Like, because they said we're running low. Well, okay, low inventory. I don't know what. That's some Pentagon term, but yeah, like the javelins and stuff. It's like, yeah, we're running kind of low on those. It's like, oh, I thought we had 1 million of them. It's like, that would cost more than 3 aircraft carriers to build 1 million of those. Like, and they would just be sitting somewhere, just aging, not like wine either. So yeah, people don't understand that. They think there's like this secret bunker with like 1 billion missiles in it. It's like, no, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's air temperature controlled, so nothing ever goes bad. It's like, do you know the shit we got? The rusty cans we put stuff in that holds our food.
Yeah.
Now, next to the stuff that's new and painted, but
Well, I remember once somebody was talking about tanks, and it was like tank warfare or something, but it's like someone said, it's like, yeah, we had like 100,000 Sherman tanks in World War II. It's like, no, we had like 30,000. And half of those were giveaways to other countries, because they were saying like, oh, we have like 20,000 Abrams tanks. It's like, no, we don't. That'd be an absurd amount of tanks. It cost a couple $1 million a crack,
Well, they're like 50 tons a piece. That's like,
yeah, where are you going to park it all?
It's 500 million tons you got to move.
Yeah, people have these ridiculous ideas like, oh, we have like 10,000 aircraft. It's like, no, we don't. We don't have that many. We're not using them enough to I mean, be glad we don't. If you needed that many, the world's really screwed up.
Yeah. Countries used to have things called a navy, and they don't have those anymore because it's absurdly expensive.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is like they always say, it's like the U.S. has the largest, most powerful navy in the world. It's like, yeah, and we pay more to defend our country than the next 10 countries after us. That includes China and Russia, like huge countries with lots of people in them. And it's like, we spend more than them and everyone in NATO combined. And yeah, it is fun to see them like, oh, look, that's cool. But it's like when you realize like, damn, my kid could have gone to college a lot cheaper if we just had a lot less of that we've never used, by the way, never really used a lot of it, thankfully.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're talking.
It gets better to have it and not use it.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay with like a 9mm, not with an aircraft that like, oh, it costs $1 billion to build, and it's like, yeah, but what are you not telling me there? Like, once you build it, it's perfect and it never gets maintained. You know how much it costs to refuel a nuclear refuel a Nimitz aircraft carrier? Take a guess. It's like $50 million.
Okay.
Yeah, just in maintenance, like that's like a nuclear aircraft carrier. It's huge, but it's like, yeah, imagine all the shit like that we have, and it's like, it's not maintenance free. Not only is it expensive to buy, but it requires huge amounts of money to maintain.
And education to teach the people to maintain
teach
it.
People to be nuclear engineers. You know how much percentage of the population is smart enough to do that? It's pretty small. Those guys can literally do anything. For some reason, they joined the Navy, but like, yeah, there's just not that much brains and money to go around.
Yeah, so the kids playing around with the F4 Phantom, we show some official getting mail about like all the emergency officials about like, hey, this person becomes this in this situation. There's panic buying, which we know that from the pandemic.
Oh yeah. I was never in a store during a panic, but I was always there afterwards. It's like, where is everything, and who has this much money? Like, what? I imagine the pandemic was like a boon for credit card companies.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, like, I could probably afford. Let's see, a thing of toilet paper at the wholesale club is like $20. So I guess in a week I could probably buy $400 worth of toilet paper if I had to, for whatever reason. But there was like literally like they were selling it off trucks.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you think is going to happen? How much shitting is going on?
Yeah, I remember one time when we were completely sold out of all our pizzas, and
Oh, I'm surprised they didn't burn the place down.
and we were sold out of bread, just completely out of bread.
Yeah, you couldn't get bread. I remember that.
Which that my hack for that was tortillas.
Yeah.
Is just substitute tortillas. One, they taste just as good. Two, the shelf life is about 4 months longer than bread.
Oh, okay.
I had brats like wrapped in tortillas. Like that was actually surprisingly good because something about the chewiness of tortillas like worked with the kind of like the way the case kind of bit away and stuff like that. So, have some burger burritos. Cut a burger in half and then throw the toppings inside the tortilla and then a burger burrito.
Yeah, it's just you're not missing anything. It's just as good.
Oh, and peanut butter and jelly roll up. Great.
Yeah. You couldn't find peanut butter here for like a month to save your ass. I mean, you could not find any. They were bringing in that weird like Nature's Bounty hippie crap. Like people were stabbing each other to death over that. And the thing is, like in the context of this movie, panic buying makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's like you got to get as many cans in your tree fort or your pillow fort nuclear fallout shelter as you can. Yeah, but it's like in the context of the pandemic we went through, it's like there weren't like bodies in the streets and like like the freeways are incinerated or something. Like none of that happened. It was just people kept by. I guess that's what you do in America because commerce is a substitution for culture in our country. So it's like if I buy more stuff, I'm a better person.
Yeah, and the whole bodies not being in the streets, which is what gave the runway for all the anti-vaxxers and stuff like that to have their way with everything. Because
well, that's true.
Unless you worked at a hospital, you had no idea. You couldn't see the pandemic unless you worked at a hospital, which all those people now have like just post-traumatic PTSD from that shit.
My wife's had 3 jobs in a year because and she did not work in a hospital. I'll tell you, I don't know, like, because like I said, I've always been kind of paranoid anyway, and I love conspiracy theories. And like, if I didn't have a wife who worked in healthcare, I don't know what my view would be on this. I really don't, because I could like if she worked at like some factory or something, and so did I. It's like, yeah, I didn't see. The only thing we saw around here was the continuous like life flight helicopters in like circular orbit going to U of M and St. Joe and all that. And then all the people she knew that worked at those places and the stories she was hearing. Other than that, like it didn't really affect our life a whole lot. It's like, I didn't think anything was going on.
Yeah.
Just, everyone's wearing masks now and people are like kind of like standoffish, which is like, for me, it's like wonderful. Near me, I don't want to be near you. Hey, you don't want to stop and have a casual conversation about something? Great. So, yeah. Anyway, back to the movie.
Thursday, May 19th. Officials are getting updates on supplies. Blankets are getting delivered to a school for some reason, I guess in preparation. So
soak them with water to protect you from the thermal pulse.
Jimmy's dad Jimmy's talking to his dad while he's farming, which I thought at first he has this orange implement that he's like shoving stuff into the ground with, and I thought he just had a carrot and he was just like pounding other carrots into the ground with a carrot.
The British way.
But it wasn't that. But that image in my head was funny though. Just like
Dad, what you doing? Carroting, son. Time for carroting. Oh, cool. I remember that when I was a kid. We used to carrot all the time. Now my carrot got me in trouble. Ah, Dad. Balefully. Like, these are the conversations I wish that went on in this movie.
They are curious about some jets taking off. It's like, well, that's a new time for the jets to take off.
Yeah.
We got titles: RAF Finningley, or Finningley, whoever you say. It's likely
Finningley. RAF Finningley.
Likely wartime function, base for U.S. Phantom jets, 5 miles from Doncaster. Which, that probably meant something to British people. I'm like, great, 5 miles from a town I also don't know. 17 miles.
Not the Doncaster Goat Festival.
This is a fun one. So instead of, they might have DEF CON as well, but instead of DEF CON, they have Bikini State, and it changes from black to amber.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
Yeah, because black seems worse, so I don't know how amber's better.
I was thinking of The Prisoner. Like, every time he tried to escape, it was always orange alert. Like, wouldn't it be red alert? He's escaping. It's no orange alert. Send out the bubble. Yeah, they just got to be weird. Steak, Jabberwocky. It's like, yeah, of course. Okay, Harry Potter, we got it.
Well, I remember in instead of DEF CON, and it's what was it? What's the nuclear movie with Powers Booth?
By Dawn's Early Light.
Yeah, by Dawn's Early Light. It was like it changed. It had, like, they have weird names where it goes from like Snowman to Cock Pistol or something like that.
Oh, Snowman to Applejack. It's like, really? That's a hell of a thing to be thinking about before everyone dies. That'll throw them off.
Yeah, if it was named something else, it'd cause a panic.
Well, we actually had a problem with that in the 50s and 60s. We're naming things because it was like, like military plans and stuff. And a lot of it was the guys from World War II had become generals now. And so, like, every war plan had this name, like, it's Tungsten Dawn or Operation Twilight of Victory, or it's like, no, we got to come up with different names because the spies vector in on that. So they made like a computer or something that randomly generated names.
Yeah.
And some guys at CIA got in trouble because they used the program because it named things after rivers or forests, and it's like, we can't have Operation Volga and Operation Ubangi. Like, who came up with this? It's like, it was from the computer because those are rivers. And they're like, oh, shit. Yeah, Operation Volga. That's going to go great talking about it.
It's casino pub time.
Yeah.
The Russians moved some missiles in Iran. Jimmy has a very bad friend who gets him to hit on some women at the bar while he's about to get married and move in with his girlfriend. So.
Get those birds over there while you're still single. It's like, that's a good friend. Yeah, cheat on your wife or have a pint. Fuck life. As it turned out, his friend was right. He might as well have done it.
Yeah. Oh, he did do it, so yeah.
Yeah.
The one official we keep seeing as like a late night planning session. Jimmy sleeps with some girl that he met, and then there's like they have like sound of like military vehicles moving into town, and they're kind of like distressed by that. It's like, oh, what's going on? Saturday, May 21st, we have protests, and then the government takes over the British Airways so they can move troops around, which makes sense, but something I've never seen before. It's like, oh yeah, that would definitely cause distress if you can't get on a flight because we got to move troops around.
Yeah. That's a clear sign that like things are in trouble. And it's like, can I get my ticket on British Airways? No, we're flying troops everywhere. Oh, okay. I think that's going to be a problem.
So I have that being the end of Act 1. So Act 2, Sunday, May 22nd, we have people at church praying. We got 12 noon, U.S. ultimatum expires. 1300 B-52 strike with conventional weapons on Mossad base, or yeah, is it Mossad or Mashad? Okay.
Yeah, which base was it?
I have here it's like Mash Ad, but I don't know if that's Mossad or Mashad.
Yeah, I forget which one. Anyway, yeah, a base in Iran.
Russians defend base with a nuclear-tipped air defense missile. Many B-52s are lost. 1400, the U.S. responds with a single battlefield nuclear weapon on a Soviet base. Exchange stops.
Yeah, it was the Mashhad base. Yeah.
Okay.
That's an air base, or it's like a army base or whatever.
Okay. And we get to a store, gets robbed when like somebody comes in and says like, oh, the Russians and the Americans are fighting, and so then everybody just takes carts full of stuff and leaves, and the guy's like, hey, you gotta pay for that.
Yeah, that guy's been raising the prices too. Because that guy's like, it was 20p yesterday.
And there was even more unrest and looting at night, and like, you know, the one guy's Jimmy's parents can't get to sleep because there's just so much chatter and screaming in the streets at night. Tuesday, May 24th, people are packing up and moving out of town. The bureaucrat goes through his briefs. Yeah, I always have Jimmy's working as a carpenter or whatever. Then we got titles: U.S. carrier Kitty Hawk sunk in Persian Gulf, American air and naval blockade of Cuba, anti-Soviet demonstration in U.S. cities, damage to Russian consulates. Which, you know, we have that now. So yeah. Further riots in East Germany, which reminded me, like, oh yeah, East Germany was a thing. East and West Germany. Oh yeah, here's this one. Hospitals cleared for expected casualties. So it's like they just send all the old people home waiting for casualties.
Yeah, because the one guy and they got to get his mom.
Yeah,
it's her parents, I think.
Oh yeah, it's the one that ends up being like under a blanket for like 5 years. And they keep walking past it. Wednesday, May 25th, 2 nukes go off in the Middle East. Here's where they move all the officials into a bunker. And then we get like the cryptic nuclear warning broadcast. Like, not warning, but like this is the ones like you played on American Greed Factory, where it's like
protect and survive.
Yeah.
With the weird, like, you know, the music that makes you feel safe. Yeah. If a corpse has been in your house for more than 5 days, dig a trench and bury it. It's like, these are just unthinkable scenarios. Yeah.
I don't have the right board for that kind of weird, but yeah. So I'll just give you some vague 80s poly synth. And it's night, and it says like fire engines deployed to safety, which I guess just like they get them out of the city because like, well, if a nuclear bomb goes off, like there's gonna be fire everywhere, so have them surround the fire that's gonna be.
Never mind that they won't start. You don't have gas to fuel them or water to put the fires out with. But
well, I mean, they will for that night. So
yeah.
Thursday, May 26th, cryptic newscast on how to deal with dead bodies, which is basically like, if you can't bury them outside because it's too unsafe, you know, just put a blanket over them. And then here's where the bureaucrats get like an attack warning red. People outside hear an air raid siren, and then they start to panic and run for cover. You have 8:35. A single warhead explodes above North Sea. Energy pulse burns out many electrical systems. You know, they come back to the bunker, and I forget, like all the computers are fried, and some guy's like, "Get the telewatt" or something. He's like throws something on a desk. I don't even know what it is. It's like, I don't know, get some radio equipment or something.
Yeah, they had the aerial hooked up to the main radio, and of course it got burned up in an EMP attack. Because they were supposed to unplug the radio, but then they couldn't communicate with anyone. So they're arguing back and forth.
Massive damage to communications across Britain and Northwest Europe. 8:37, first missile salvo hits NATO military targets. And then here's we have footage of nuclear blast going off, and then there's like a bright light, and then people panicking further. You get 80. I think it's like it's like you go to Internet Movie Database. If you're paused on like the trailer for this movie, this is like where the lady's like going like, and then they cut to her like peeing her pants.
Yeah, yeah, that was a weird one.
Let's see here. 80 megatons fall on UK. Cuts of explosions and things and people on fire. They have weird reverse footage of a cat to make it look like like it's all weird, but it was just a cat with catnip, and they reversed the footage because some people are concerned they killed a cat to show the horrors of nuclear war. It's like, nah, the cat was just being weird.
Something else that I heard on the commentary and some other trivia was, remember all the protests that were going on like before this happened?
Yeah.
Like the trade union people and the other people were out in the street protesting against this war buildup and all. Those were all like real communists and real leftist political people in the UK.
Yeah.
They found them, and and there was a lot of people that, like, I think the guy that wrote the script was like one of those people too, which is like, that's always kind of weird. It's like, oh yeah, that's allowed in the UK at that time. Like, you can be a communist. It's like, and those guys are still around there. It's like, wait, we know it's bad, but we got an idea. It's like, yeah, oh, we'll get to you in a minute, you know. But it was funny that, like, yeah, that's a lot of those protest stuff and all that. Was like, those are real people.
Well, yeah, in America, like, communist just means Russian. So it's like, if you're a communist, it just means you're like pro-Russian. Where it's like it might just mean a general concept of communism, and it's like,
oh no, it is. Yeah, but it's like, you can't, like, especially in the 80s, like in America, you couldn't hold public office or have a job or really function if you were like an active communist. Like, they wouldn't.
But it wasn't on books. You couldn't do that. It was just a cultural blackballing.
Well,
if you were
knocking on your door every other month. Yeah, what you doing? How's it going? You pick up your phone and it sounded like a staccato burst of it's like, I wonder who's on the phone. But yeah, that's funny to, like, you see that and you remember, it's like, oh, yeah, those people were actually existed in like Europe and the UK. I mean, they didn't hold political power, but they like ran unions and stuff. Like, that was all. It's just very different here. Just cultural differences.
We got East-West exchange 3,000 megatons. 210 megatons fall on the UK. 2/3 of houses in Britain within possible fire zones. The bureaucrats are like picking up the pieces and like attempting control.
Yeah, I kind of felt sorry for these guys in the basement. It's like they're trying to direct things and do stuff, and it's like, yeah, everything's been destroyed, you know. I mean, this movie, they never make it seem like there was just a total, complete annihilation of the government. Like, there was always something there in the background doing stuff, but it wasn't very effective. It was like they're still just trying to, keep things going.
Well, I mean, half the time you see it. Well, you see like what they have to, like, the decisions they have to make is like, oh, we got this food in a warehouse that's being guarded by cops. What are we gonna do with it? It's like, well, we can't feed people that are just gonna die in a week.
Yeah. And they're a terrible situation down there. And yelling out over radios and yelling at each other. I see, that's the thing about why I called this the body horror nuclear war movie. It's not just all the mutilation and death. It's like, can you imagine what that basement smelled like after about a week? Cigarettes, tea, and a bunch of like British people that, like, haven't had a shower, and they're dealing with the worst stuff possible. And I guess they're pissing in buckets. I don't know, because I'm pretty sure the toilet doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, that'd be the worst place to be. Even if you had unlimited cigarettes and tea, it would just be terrible. Just reek.
Fallout falls in the city. People are getting radiation sickness. I think here they make a thing that, like, at this point, the shock of the bomb going off is basically, you can't tell the difference between radiation sickness and just like coming off of shock.
Yeah, just people freaking out.
Here we cut back to the bureaucrats and they're trying to figure out like where the meaningful survivors are. It's like, They mark down like where the bomb went off. It's like, all right, everyone in this radius like is not worth our time.
Yeah, you're just writing people off.
Yeah. um, which when they do these like studies, it's a lot of like statistics and stuff like that. That's just what happens. Where it's like you can't actually know what's going to happen, so you got to rely on statistics, which is not perfect, but it's it's what it is. Like the statistics aren't lying, but they also leave room for error. So
Yeah.
We have attack plus 1 week. Food stocks are controlled by central government representatives. This says no food distribution likely until 2 weeks after attack. We have a Duna gas mask that's guarding the reserves. The bureaucrats argue about distributing food to people who are just going to die. We have Ruth's parents are like drag out the dead grandma and cover her, and Ruth runs away because she's like distraught about Jimmy being dead. I forgot.
Well, let's not forget in the movie during I think it's the final attack sequence where they hit the Tinsley Viaduct and wipe out the steel plant, that E.T. is vaporized by a blowtorch like 4 different times. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Okay, yeah, I saw a weird thing burning. Okay.
Yeah, that was E.T., and they just kept hitting him with a blowtorch. And they did a lot of like reverse shots, reverse angles, reverse the film on it. But yeah, that was supposed to represent like human death.
Yeah, they have Jimmy like seemingly like get away from the explosion. He was like hiding under a truck. And then I'm just like, oh, is he just dead now? Because they mentioned like you see his friend later on. And it's like, and he says like he kind of mentions like the last time he saw him, but it didn't necessarily make sound like he saw him die or anything like that. But yeah, Jimmy seems to be gone at this point in the movie. So, Sunday, June 5th, attack plus 10 days, nuclear winter. We're setting in nicely. It's just a general despair across the Sheffield wasteland.
Just a nuclear sadness is set in. I forgot. Yeah, this was. This movie relies heavily on that as a trope. It's like the main killer is like it's just freezing cold all the time and you can't grow crops. It's the nuclear winter.
Yeah.
Which now is like doesn't no one. It's been disproven like it wouldn't happen that way. But for this movie, it's like winter all the time. But now they say like, no, that actually wouldn't happen. We were wrong. It's like, oh, okay, wait a minute.
Well, the reverse happened.
I forget what's the thing with nuclear winter. Where's the thing?
Because basically, if
the thing that causes nuclear winter is number one, there would be a lot of ground bursts, but like I said, air bursts are way more effective for nuclear weapons because they can lens the damage out a lot further. Yeah. The only time you do ground bursts is when you're attacking like hardened silos or like NORAD or something. Like then you want to get really close to the ground. But you don't really want to do a lot of ground bursts because again, it just sucks a bunch of radiated dust into the air that will then blow back to Russia, mainland Europe, and all that. So, and another thing is when remember when they set all the oil fields on fire in Iraq during the first Gulf War in the early 90s?
Yeah.
That was they said like global temperatures are going to drop by like 10 degrees or something because this is the exact kind of stuff is because the nuclear winter would really come from like all the forests and cities catching on fire and all the shit that would go in the air. But they figured out that doesn't go as high as they thought, and it settles out pretty fast. So they're like, oh, okay, well, nuclear winter is not like what we thought it would be.
Yeah, I always understood the concept of nuclear winter is just that there's so much dust in the air that it blocks out the sun for a time, and then that's the idea is less sun rays means less temperature. But
well, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you have like a full massive 5,000 plus megaton exchange where you're just destroying everything in the world that can be destroyed, it's like then you'll have something like that. This was not as big a war as that, but it's also like the real test of that was when the oil fields were on fire because they're like, that's going to lower global temperatures by quite a bit, and it's like no, it didn't go as high into the atmosphere as they thought, and so the big culprit for nuclear winter would be like the forest just burning out of control all over the world, and it's like that doesn't actually work that way, but But at this time, it was like it's like a lot of this stuff. Like you don't know because no one's ever lived through it. Like you can't really
Well,
know what's going to happen, so you just kind of guess.
well, I think the nuclear winter stuff was based on something that Carl Sagan and some other guy like worked together on as a potential outcome of nuclear war.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you got to remember, all nuclear wars in fiction are full release. Like just like both sides launch all their weapons simultaneously, and that there's no like counter value. There's no talking like, hey, we could kill 20 million less people if we stop right now. Victory is not achievable by either side at this point, but that never happens. It's always like the only movie that ever happened in was Fail Safe. It's like, okay, we trade New York for Moscow and we stop the killing. It's like, okay, deal. It's like that's the only one. But that was, that was only dramatic on a small scale.
so I have Act 3. 3,000 megaton exchange, smoke produced 100 million tons, dust lifted in atmosphere of 100 million tons. Voiceover of atmosphere being blocked by dust lifted by nukes. Again, you said that if all the nukes were ground burst nukes, but
yeah, and they were all multi-megaton, which they weren't even in the 80s.
Monday, June 6th, attack plus 11 days. Here I wrote, I think Ruth finds Jimmy's dead's mom, which is like huddled under like an angled like mattress, and now she's burnt.
Yeah. These were the Tree Fort or the Pello Fort nuclear bomb shelters that were advertised in Protect and Survive.
And like the Jimmy's parents were like bad with like radiation sickness, but then suddenly his mom's like half burnt for some reason. But
well, as the radiation burns, just
okay.
working through her body, because she got like a flash, and then with no treatment, your skin just starts to rot because nuclear radiation prevents your cells from dividing, so you can't really heal.
Yeah.
So they actually used Rice Krispies and some kind of glue, and then they just painted. That's how they got such horrible looking burns on people at a budget. Like the burns in this movie look horrible, but it's how it's shot, and it's mostly in the dark or tinted. But it's like, yeah, we just use like Rice Krispies and glue and painted it dark skin colors and stuff. And he goes, it looks really gross. It looks horrible. It's like, yeah, good job. It worked.
People are lining up at the fences at the food warehouses with the police like tear gas the crowd. I think this might be where like the cover guy is, who has like, he's like a cop with like a submachine gun. He's got like a wrapping on his face.
Oh, yeah, most of his face has been burnt off, and he just looks like a mummy with 2 eye holes.
Yeah. It's like, oh, this is gonna be iconic character. It's like, no, this is the only scene he's in. Yeah. Which I thought this might have been Jimmy, like he just like took a job as like a military guy because he was just able-bodied, but no, it's not Jimmy. But
no.
And then also the bureaucrats are continually overwhelmed. There's no decision that they can make that will make anybody happy. It's just all bad decisions. There's like attack plus 22 days, likely epidemics, cholera, dysentery, typhoid. So we're just, there's no
back to the diseases of the 18th century.
Yeah, there's no medicine that they can distribute at this point for what everybody has.
And people are just drinking out of muddy holes where corpses are rotting and stuff. Like, yeah, this is the worst possible scenario.
Some military guys hold up some looters, and then they take the looter stuff. So
and they shoot the looters. You don't see it, but you hear it.
And I wrote down, they definitely find the ugliest people they could find to eat food. It's like, this is the most disgusting thing in the movie. It's just,
yeah, they're like just plunging bread into bowls of soup. Like they're wasting half the food because they're shoving it into their mouths so quick it's just running down their face. And they're doing close up on that too.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
and into their eyes and
yeah, and the microphone's cranked all up so you can just hear like every piece of their esophagus like cringe with slime.
Yeah. Oh
yeah. Yeah, this is definitely not the libertarian dream of the apocalypse.
Where's the Mad Max trucks and ISP mask and.
Here's the talk about disposal of bodies. There's no spare fuel for cremation. There's no spare fuel for bulldozers to just bulldoze a group of people into a hole
Yep.
or dig a hole. And it's wasteful for manpower to dig pits by hand. So, unburied corpses in UK estimated 10 to 20 million.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just rotting outside.
That's a real thing. That shit would really happen. I mean,
Yeah.
it would. I mean, the thing is, they're talking about feeding people 600 calories a day.
Yeah.
You couldn't dig a hole day after day after day on 600 calories. I mean, you would look like like the worst like concentration camp victims after 2 months of that. It's just there's no way. And if you put a lot of bodies in the ground, like I found this out in World War I and World War II also, it's like, hey, why does the river stink? It's like, where do you think the juice from those rotting bodies is going? It just filters out into the ground and gets into the water. I mean, best thing to do is burn bodies, but again, you don't have enough gas to run your tractors. You're not going to be pouring them on corpses.
Here, I don't know what this place is. It specifically mentions the Door and Totally Tennis Club attack plus 4 weeks. It's just a tennis club they turned into a detention camp for looters.
Yeah.
Here's where we have the soldiers like kind of dig their way to the bureaucrats who are underground and like were buried after the bombs went off, but they get in there and they're just all dead, suffocated or whatever.
They were sucking fallout into through their air system.
Yeah.
Remember all those vents on the wall with the strings in front of them that would show
Yeah.
if they were running? Well, they're just pulling in radiation and fallout in those because they have to circulate the air in and out of there, or they'll just suffocate. So it's like, well, this is the air you have to breathe.
Here it talks about special court justice. They're giving wide range of powers, and so it's basically just like almost a weird music video of just blood splattering on a wall. So it's like, oh, they're just executing random people for random reasons because people existing is the worst thing right now because everybody takes up resources. So.
Yeah, it's like if you're not like holding a rifle or using a shovel, we'll just shoot you because we can't feed you.
5 weeks after attack, no electricity, no mains water, no sanitation. Fuel stocks diminishing, transport difficult, food supplies unreliable. There's an exodus from the cities. The fallout deaths start peaking. And then, like, as everyone's leaving the city, a plane flies overhead with a loudspeaker explaining, hey, go back home. We can't take care of you.
There is no help here. Go back to your rotting corpse city.
Buxton, 20 miles from Sheffield, cops are taking people and like forcing them to live in someone's house.
Yeah.
But when the cops leave, like the people in the house just kick everybody out. So this is where Ruth was like going to be there, but he throws out her bag of stuff and then she grabs it, which I felt bad because like the bag got ripped. Like, oh no, all her stuff.
I'm gonna get another one of those. That's one. You see, the environmental people would love this movie. It's like, well, no more plastic bags. See, we did it. It's like, yeah, you did it.
Ruth meets Jimmy's friend, but she never talks to him. He just like talks about Jimmy. But like they don't know if he's alive. 6 weeks after the attack, Ruth and Jimmy's friend eat a dead sheep, and they're like debating whether like it's like, yeah, sheep don't die from the cold. It's like, so it must be irradiated, so it's probably not safe to eat. But they eat it anyway. So
yeah. What are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, they don't show any effects of it, but I'm guessing they probably got either radiation or dysentery from that thing or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, her story was supposed to be a lot more harrowing, but there's stuff they just didn't write in because it was so bad. One of the reasons she was so dissociated from people is like, it was like she was just going to be raped and beat up and traded off. They just didn't write that into the movie because it's like, we can't do all this. Not all at once.
Ruth starts having daymares. It's on screen. Direct effects of the attack: deaths between 17 and 38 million from blast, heat, and fallout. Remaining population are weak, cold, and hungry. There's a title says attack in spring, but I don't know what that means. This is darkness and cold, reduced plant activity to very low levels. and little ripening of crops.
Well,
So
it
I don't
means
know.
that they were attacked in the growing season.
Oh, okay.
They weren't attacked in like winter when the harvest was in.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so they can't. Basically, what was planted didn't grow very much, and there's little hope of like having a second harvest at this point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, everyone's focusing on harvesting crops, so they're like, they're running tractors, and everyone's just all hands on deck picking stuff off the ground. And people are just dying in the fields too. Ruth gives birth. Sunday, it's December 25th. So
well, let's not like skip over that. Like one of the most memorable scenes in the movie where
oh yeah,
she gives birth in a barn and then has to like bite through the umbilical cord to disconnect it from the her body, and it's like, wow, okay.
Well, I thought. Well, I am. Well, first of all, like, wait. Like, well, I accidentally skipped over that because I hit the +30 button, and then it's the people sitting around the fire, and it's Christmas, and they have the baby crying, but then the crying stops all of a sudden, and then everyone's just like staring distraught at the fire. I was like, did they just cook the baby?
Wait a minute, what's going on? Is the baby in an oven? What?
They didn't. So
It wasn't.
March, 10 months after attack, people are looting grain silos. The baby's still alive. Ruth is trying to grind up the grain. It doesn't seem to be working, but
No, I mean, I wouldn't know how to do that either.
yeah,
So.
I mean,
She's like using an old paint can.
yeah, because you take like grain and like you could grind it up, and then it becomes flour, and then from flour you can make bread. But otherwise, like that's I don't know, like if that stuff doesn't happen, like how you rectify that. So if one thing goes wrong, I'm screwed.
Well, if she could boil water, she could make like millet with just the raw grain.
Yeah.
But the problem is, I mean, that would like, you're not dealing with a place where you can drink a lot of water. So you'd be so bound up eating that all the time. Like I mean, because there's no laxatives, there's not even aspirin at this point. And it's like, oh my God, but you wouldn't starve to death, which is the worst way to die. So.
May, 1 year after the attack, we got people eating rats. Skies become clearer and there's returning sunlight, but it's heavier with ultraviolet light. So cataracts are now widespread, higher risk of cancer and leukemia. Second and subsequent harvest, no fertilizers, no agrochemicals, crops susceptible to virus, disease, and insects. 3 to 8 years after the attack, population reaches minimum. UK numbers may decline to medieval numbers, possibly between 4 and 11 million. 10 years after, we have Ruth and her daughter has some obvious mental disability. And they're just people farming with hand tools.
Yeah.
Like very rudimentary. Like they don't even have like.
Oh, it's like the Middle Ages. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just tying sticks together,
Yeah.
Like, this is a plow. The thing that's wrong with her daughter is it wasn't explained, but if you don't eat a lot as a child, you'll be dumb as a stone when you grow up because you just have no development.
Yeah.
And you don't have social skills. It's like, oh yeah, this is like.
But
she
also,
has no emotional reactions to anything, really.
But also, like the radiation when like she was developing, so that doesn't help. So.
Yeah, the massive amounts of radiation don't. But that was more of a starvation thing. They just didn't make that clear.
Well, I'm
just throwing in stuff I heard from the.
Well, some
there's like a 4-hour commentary you can watch this movie on too.
Well, there's also some trivia I saw that said that like when you're pregnant and like you get like subject to radiation, a lot of the radiation just ends up in the baby. So
yeah,
rather than you.
Baby is a natural radiation shield.
Ruth collapses. She can't get up, and then she shows that she has cataracts, and then her daughter's just like kind of like like shoving her. It's like, come on, work. And then she just dies, and her daughter takes some of her stuff and leaves.
Yep.
I think her name's Jane. At least I found that in the I don't know if it's said or something, but I think it's in like I read it in like the trivia section. So, some people have like rigged up a TV, so somebody has rudimentary electricity going on, and like they've made like VHS, and so they make a makeshift school out of just watching these like educational videos, which like they're looking at skeletons of animals. It's like, oh, what a horrible thing to show in this situation.
That's a cat. And then they show it like stuffed, and it's like the cat looks more screwed up as a cat as a skeleton. It's like, I like the skeleton cat better. That cat looks like it's got problems.
And then there's just some old lady in the background who's just mouthing the words to the video, like she's seen it so many times or something. And the kids are like unthreading cloth to make like new clothes or something. So
Yeah.
oh, is this the school with the blankets? But I think it's just a makeshift school, and that's just random stuff they're taking apart to put back together. Then we have 13 years after. Jane is like making a fire in some farm. She's trying to cook a rabbit, and then some guys show up and try to steal it from her. They don't sound like they're speaking English anymore, so this is just like all these kids have some mental disability, and maybe language has changed.
It's almost like that movie with Jodie. Was it Jodie Foster, where she was raised by people that were like
Nell or something like that?
Yeah, because I was waiting for one of them to go chicka chicka pee. You know, it's like, what are you saying? It's yeah, but they're all basically dumb as box of rocks.
Yeah. Then they show looters getting shot at, but Jane is one of the looters because like apparently she's joined the kids that were harassing her earlier. And then like she ends up fighting with one of the kids, and then she gets raped while fighting the guy, but they don't like make that explicit. They just have her like the next scene she gives birth and the baby's stillborn or weird looking or something, and she just screams, and that's the end of the movie.
Yep.
And
Merry Christmas.
Well, here's the other thing. I thought there's like a guy next to her in the hospital bed who has like a screwed up face, and I thought, oh, is that Jimmy? Because that would be ironic. But again, Jimmy's not important to the rest of this movie, so it could be or could not be. I don't know.
Yeah, it was kind of just strange.
But it takes you through the whole horrifying exchange of what a nuclear war does to population.
It's like way worse than like, because the day after was like, that was more like the actual like attacks. And I mean, it was called The Day After, so that's all the further you get. It's not like, it's basically implied that there's not much left, and
Well, yeah, it's Americans. Like you give them something happens. It's like there's still hope. It's like, oh, we can rebuild. This thing's like, no.
Yeah, not really. But yeah, that's Threads. It's it's a nuclear war paranoia film from the 80s.
Yeah, like I think the other thing that's like more horrifying nuclear movie is probably, have you ever seen, well, I haven't seen it, I've just seen like the Hiroshima sequence. There's a anime called Barefoot Gin.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Which that has a lot of like, hey, the guy who made that would like lived through Hiroshima, so a lot of that stuff was just things he saw, which is like, oh wow, this is super horrifying. Just people welded together and stuff like that. And
yeah, it's like half their face melted off, and
yeah.
I mean, all that shit happened.
Yeah. And that was a low yield nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I don't even think we have nuclear weapons that have that low. Well, maybe some battlefield weapons are that low, but yeah, this was this was one of those things that like
and apparently Reagan saw this and like kind of like lowered his fervor for war and his speeches after.
Yeah.
Which again, I hate that people have to go through a whole production to change like the ideology of a leader.
Yeah, it's like, because it's like he didn't know this. Like he didn't know how bad this could be. He had to have it visually presented to him. I mean, it's like, and this was again. We were kind of like, there's phases of nuclear war fiction, and I read it all. because like the first like famous one is The Last Babylon, which was like set in the 50s,
Oh,
and that was like um that would be in the Grand Slam era of like, yeah, the Russians sent bombers in and they dropped like 5 megaton warheads all over the place, and you know, because these people lived in like out in the desert or something, like it was the only way you could survive, and so that one was yeah, that was like the first one, and then there was a bunch of stuff in the 60s and the 70s, but the 80s particularly had a lot of verve and just better technology to express it, and you could make movies that were just big downers. Like you couldn't make downer movies that talked bad about war, because that's, you know, that's what most of our economy was based on after World War II, is rebuilding, you know, having this insane nuclear arsenals.
yeah, there wasn't too many like downer nuclear movies in the 70s because that was all like, that was all like, Vietnam people coming home kind of movies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were some, but it was a lot more of it was science fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of like a boy and his dog type stuff was the
Yeah,
70s, like nuclear movies and stuff like that.
it was kind of a commentary on society at that time through the lens of nuclear war and science fiction. And
And you have the Fallout series, which that came out in the 90s, but that was like kind of like a futurized 50s version of a nuclear apocalypse.
yeah, that
It
was The
kind
Last Babylon if they had like robots and stuff. Yeah.
well, I mean, that had the thing where it's like, it's kind of like the two worlds where it's like, we had the vault. So it's like, the society continues on with technology down below, and then everyone else has to fend for their lives. And so you get both sides of like, here's the, future, the continued, and then like, here's the wastelands.
Well, then you had like the Mad Max series that started in the 70s. That was like the slow apocalypse. That was like war went on in the rest of the world, but Australia was still normal but falling off the cliff
Yeah.
because Australia's not self-supporting in a lot of ways. So it's like, oh yeah, everyone else was nuked. We're just waiting to starve to death. And then that became like, that from Mad Max to Thunderdome. It changed a lot. It became more and more weird, but
I mean, it's practically an anthology series rather than like a continuing story.
yeah, yeah. But it was a cool one. It was a cool idea.
Oh yeah.
It's like, what if people just fought on roads over gasoline? It's like, well, it's short-lived and kind of pointless. But yeah, you got to have something to fight over. Got to have enemies. If you want to have life, you got to have enemies.
You can't have life without enemies.
Well, and some of the other interesting stuff, like I told you, I read that study that this movie was based on, and then that just led into other things about, what was our nuclear posture during the time of this movie? And it's like, we have so much fewer nuclear weapons in the world now than we did then. It's really insane, the kind of stuff they had back then, just as redundancy. I don't know if they were going to use it all or if they ever would have been able to, but like the Tomahawk cruise missiles used to carry nuclear warheads. It was only in the mid 90s they stopped doing that, because it's like, oh, this is unnecessary and insane. How many of these things do we need?
Well, you even got like in the mid 90s, you got movies like Broken Arrow, where it's like, the threat of nuclear war seems to have dimmed pretty quietly, but then there's just like, well, there's still nukes around, just sitting around. People can get a hold of them, right?
They're still very dangerous weapons.
Which that became a thing in the 90s and 2000s, where it's just like, a rogue country with a nuclear weapon.
Russians selling nukes. And
yeah.
What was that one with George Clooney? It was kind of cool. Was it The Peacemaker?
Yeah.
The one where they detonated the nuclear missile on the train, but they switched the trains, so all the other nuclear missiles that were on the train they were trying to sell, and he figured out somehow, or the team, whatever, figured out like, all the weapons weren't blown up in that. There's no way. And then they're like, where are they? And it's like the Russians just or rogue Russian general trying to sell weapons to whatever country or whoever. And then, of course, The Sum of All Fears, the movie, came out in, was that early 2000s, late 90s?
Yeah.
No, it was after 9/11.
So, yeah, it was after 9/11, but that's still early 2000s.
Yep. And now we just don't. They don't really do that a lot anymore. I mean, they probably will now because
Video games, they still do stuff like that.
well, I could see movies and series coming out now about like, oh, where's this Russia Ukraine thing? Because
Yeah.
there's technically war in Europe with Russia
Yeah.
through proxies, and it's like, yeah. And like I was joking around at the beginning, it's like it's people just like Joe needs to invoke Article 2. It's like, no, 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 no. Like all these people think like hot war with Russia is going to be a fun thing. Because you see how bad their army is now. The first thing they're going to do is use nuclear weapons. They don't have like some hidden force that's going to surprise everyone.
I remember like the first run of the Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like that was like nukes going off in the Middle East and then war with the Russians, and then they invade America. Not necessarily because it made sense, but that was just a fun thing to do visually.
Oh yeah, I mean it was cool.
And you had the good old, I'm not sure if Joe Buff came with it, but I remember reading that in his book where you do like the air burst. You do like the burst in space with the nuclear weapon that then like shuts off the power grid. So
yeah,
you don't get like the massive radiation effects you would if it air bursts, but you do get all the EMP effects, and so
but you had to do it with Russian missiles from Russia, so it didn't start a war. Yeah, Seas of Crisis, one of the coolest books you'll ever read. I mean, all those Joe Buff books are cool, but Seas of Crisis was like, holy shit, this is crazy. So many people died. It was not like people, like millions of people, but just like everyone they sent in. It's like, this is a suicide mission, and that book proved it. Yeah, it was, definitely. It's like a handful of people survived. But yeah, that's a cool premise.
But like but no, lately they've kind of like rebooted Modern Warfare again, and but they got away from the nuke stuff.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. It's still like intrigue in the Middle East, but that's more like globetrotting nowadays. And I haven't finished the latest. Oh yeah, they kind of do that. The Sicario thing this time, where it's like terrorists by way of Mexico, and like who's gonna break first and who's gonna take the money to bring terrorists through Mexico to America. And there's a really cool some really cool set pieces in the new Modern Warfare 2 where it's like you're on a boat and then like the boat's like rocking back and forth, and then just like all the unsecured loads are just like sliding across the deck and killing people, and then it becomes your cover, and then your cover moves and you have to move with it and stuff like that.
Huh.
So that's neat.
Yeah, that does sound pretty cool.
But yeah, and then PMCs are the ultimate evil people, so yeah. So it's not nukes anymore, it's just PMCs again.
Private military, Blackwater.
Yeah.
Type things.
Yeah, which is that like now it's kind of old hat, because I think Metal Gear Solid 4 came out in like 2008 or something like that, and that was like that whole video game was about that. But
yeah, that's a scary thing if they get a hold of the wrong stuff.
Yeah, and they're only beholden. It's like, oh, it's an American PMC. That must mean their loyalties are only to America. It's like, no, it's whoever has the money.
Yeah, it's a mercenary fights for money. Well, you remember that story with the mercenary, because they sent these mercenaries into Ukraine too. I forget what the Brahms division. They're like Russian PMCs.
Huh.
And I don't know if you remember those guys. Those guys attacked Americans in Syria, and they like killed 2 Americans. And then we responded or America responded to that with like just basically overwhelming. They killed like 200 of those guys. And nothing was, it was like people were reporting on it. It was known. It's like, oh, this is basically Americans killing Russians. Like, this is crazy. And you never heard about it again. So whatever, and that group did not perform well in Ukraine either. So it's like, oh, they just picked a fight with like actual soldiers, and then like I don't know how they attacked them, but because it's all like you're not supposed to know about it, but you know about it stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, that was that same group that attacked, like killed 2 Americans in Syria, and then we responded by killing 200 of their people. and also destroying a warehouse with like tens of millions of dollars of Russian equipment in it, like with Hellfire missiles. It was where they were based out of. So basically, like wiped the Brahms division out of Syria in one attack. It's like, oh, okay. It's when I hear things like that, it makes me wonder. Like, going back to the movie and all the nuclear weapons that are just laying around in the world, what condition is the Russian arsenal in at this point? Because I know we've like rebuilt ours. Like they started under Bush, and then and it finished under Obama, and that's why Obama signed that big treaty with the Russians to eliminate so many these weapons, because essentially we didn't want to pay to keep all this shit laying around anymore. So yeah, because so they took the money from what we eliminated and got rid of and just record all our weapons. Like all of them have been redone now, and actually some of them are better than they were before. And it's like, what did the Russians do? You know, I guarantee you they didn't do that because Dietrich's like fourth mistress needed a Mercedes, so I'm sure like that money didn't get reallocated.
Yeah, I know.
If they tried to use nuclear weapons against NATO, would they explode in the silo and kill them? I mean, I wouldn't want to find out. I wouldn't want to make a bet that they wouldn't work. But I'm thinking if we had to go through and basically redo all ours, it's like, I know the Russians don't have the money to do that.
I have a story I wrote where there's a very, I see it as a very visually interesting scene. There's like these robots that are almost 1,000 years old, and people live inside the robots, and one of the robots decides it's going to fire its nuclear missiles off, and they're like thousands of years old, and like the rockets work, but like the first wave of bombs that come through, they don't detonate, so they're just like hitting the robot and bouncing off.
It's being hit by a nuclear missile going like Mach 10, but it doesn't detonate. It's just like a or it's like a metal spear.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have for tonight.
That's Threads. So Threads. If you like what you heard, and how couldn't you? You can find us at anchor.fm/Verhoeven Effect, or go to verhoeveneffect.com and you find us at the same spot. You can rate our podcast whatever you want, but remember, you control the algorithm doesn't control you. So give us the highest rating. We have listener support at verhoeveneffect.com, where you can support us a monthly stipend of either 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect, for how long that's still a thing. I don't know, maybe we'll have to switch over to TikTok, but because that's probably safer than Twitter nowadays.
What's the crazy right-wing one? Parler or whatever?
Parler used to be a thing, but now I'm not sure if that's still a thing. But you got your Truth Social, that's Trump's Twitter knockoff, but
yeah, find us at Truth Social. Sure, have a big audience there.
You can find us at Facebook at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory. You watch both that show and this show live and unedited. And you can get t-shirts at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory. And remember, this Friday, use the code BF2022 to get 20% off your order.
Write that down.
Black Friday 2022.
BF 2022. Let's finally buy a shirt. Support the show.
So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, this is Conlon.
Oh, I'm sorry, and this is Nathan.
Goodbye, America.